In this video, we're going to look at how to work with charts and graphs in Microsoft Excel. And I've got an example of each one of the kinds of graphs and charts that we're going to be working with. We're going to see how to create in this video, namely a bar chart or a column chart as well. We're going to look at how to create a line graph, and we're going to look at how to create a pie chart. And we'll look at why we need graphs and charts, and essentially we use them to visually represent our data. Looking at reams and reams of figures and text in a worksheet can sometimes be very confusing, and it can sometimes be difficult to see the big picture or to draw a conclusion based on just reams of figures, rows and rows of numbers, even if those numbers do have labels beside them. Humans are much better at dealing with pictures, pictorial or visual, graphical representations of the data. So we can look at something like this and we can immediately see that sales are going up, and then they absolutely nosedived, and then they went up a little bit again, and then took a sharp, steep descent again, and so on and so forth. And we can see with the bars going up and down like this, the same trends being mirrored from the data over here. The pie chart here is not a good example of a chart because it's based on too much data, so it's very difficult to see this. We'll be looking at that as well. We'll be looking at how certain data series or sets of data lend themselves better to certain kinds of graphs and charts, so we'll look at the difference between those. So in the next section, we're going to kick off with looking at how to create a bar or column chart in Excel. In this first part of our Skills for Work Microsoft Excel Introduction to Charts video, we're going to look at how to create a column chart in Excel. Before we can create any kind of a chart though, we need some data in our worksheet, because that's what a chart is based on. It's based on data that we've actually typed into a worksheet. So as you can see, I've got a new book opened here, a new workbook called Book 3, and I've got a worksheet. I've actually got two worksheets. I've got one called Sheet 1 and one called Sheet 2. And in Sheet 1, which I'm in at the moment, I've just typed in the following. I've typed in some headings here, product and units sold. And then I've typed in some products that you might typically see sold in an electronics store, something like DID or something like that. And then beside each product I've sold, or rather I've typed the number of units maybe that we've sold for that particular kind of model, maybe in the space of a month, or maybe in the space of 6 weeks, or maybe even in the space of a week. It doesn't really matter. All that matters is that we have some numerical data that we can now visually model, we can visually represent. And obviously I've got some labels beside it as well, because without labels these numbers wouldn't mean a whole lot. So we certainly need labels as well for the chart, as you'll see in a minute. Now, in a very short list like this, it's easy for us to look at this and say, okay, we definitely sold fewer laptops than anything else, and we definitely sold more smartphones than anything else. We can easily see the smallest and the biggest number. But you can imagine that you might have rows and rows and rows of many, many more products, and it might be difficult to get the bigger picture from that list of figures. But even if you didn't, even if we only had this small list here, or even if there was just a few more added onto it, we still had to scan these figures in order to try and determine which one was the highest and which one was the lowest, which one is performing well or selling well and which one isn't. If we had these represented as a graph or some kind of a chart, it would be easier to see. We could see it at a glance. That's what we're going to do now. And it's very easy to do in Excel. It automates a lot of the steps involved for you. But the first thing we have to do before we do anything is we need to select the data that we want to actually turn into a graph. And we do this the same way that we would select any data in a worksheet. We left click, hold our left mouse button down, and we drag our mouse over the entire data set or data series as it will come to be known. And we release the mouse. So as you can see, I've got A1 down to B9 selected here. Great, so that's the first step. The next step is I'm going to left click once on the Insert tab on the ribbon toolbar. And charts and graphs are so important in Excel that they get their own group. They get their own charts group, which you'll see on the Insert tab. Makes sense because we want to insert a chart. And there are two buttons on this which we're going to be ignoring. We're not going to be looking at maps or pivot charts. And there is a button for recommended charts, and if you hover your mouse over the recommended charts button, you can see a little tooltip pop up that tells you that Excel will recommend a good chart to showcase your data. Based on the data that you've got selected, Excel will offer you suggestions for a set of charts that it thinks will best fit the data that you've got selected. And that ties in with what I was saying in the early part of the video, in the introduction, where we saw there was a pie chart which looked very, very confusing, and the data that we had selected wouldn't have been, the pie chart wouldn't have been a good fit for a graph to represent that data. So sometimes your data will be best suited by one particular type of graph, sometimes less suited to another particular type of graph, and then at other times particular graphs or charts will be totally unsuitable for the data that you've got selected. It all depends on the data, but Excel can always recommend a chart for you. We're going to go one step further, however, and we're going to do it ourselves, and we're going to concentrate on these 8 buttons down here, which are the most common kinds of graphs and charts that we can select. And we're going to concentrate on this one first of all, which is the Insert Column or Bar Chart. And what this bar chart and column chart button will do is it will insert a column or bar chart based on the values that we've got selected. Bar charts are typically used to compare values across a few categories, which is what we have here. We have a few categories. We've got 8 different categories of product. So we're going to be able to compare these in terms of units sold. So let's left click on the down arrow. The down arrow means that there are variations of columns or bar charts, and they're all underneath this heading or this menu drop down arrow here. And we'll see that we have 2D column, 3D column, 2D bar and 3D bar. When I hover my mouse over them, I get a little preview in the middle of the screen of what the actual bar is or column chart is going to look like. Now there are more column charts as well, but we're going to ignore those. We're just going to concentrate on these 4 here. And we'll see that there is a 2D column and a 3D column. There is no difference between the two other than a style. Okay, 3D column is simply a stylized kind of snazzier version. You can see that we have a 3D effect here, but it's exactly the same as the 2D column. Now the only difference between the column and the bar charts is that in the bar charts the data or the bars are plotted horizontally as opposed to vertically with the column charts. Now, some people prefer it, again, it doesn't matter. Some people might prefer the bar charts because it's easier to maybe pick out data that's negative or that goes below a certain value. But we're just going to stick with a 2D column, a 2D cluster column, as it says here. And if I left click once, that's it. It really is as easy as that. The chart has now been placed on the screen based on the data that I had selected. And that's all there is to it. Once the chart is placed on the screen, what we can do is we can move the chart. So I'm hovering my mouse up near the top of the chart, near the title, and I'm going to left click and just move my chart around. Now let's have a look at the makeup of the chart, of the column chart which has been drawn. It's placed in a box, it's placed in an actual container. And Excel has taken the text that was in B1 and it's using that as a title for the chart, units title. Or sorry, units sold. Now we don't need to stick with that. We can change that and we'll be seeing how to do that shortly. It's also given us the actual columns visually representing the figures that we've typed in here. And then down here on the x-axis, every bar or column chart is going to have an x-axis which runs from left to right, and it's going to have a y-axis which runs up and down or vertically. And on the x-axis it's plotted, it's taken the data from A2 to A9, so TVs, laptops, printers, each different category or product. And then on the y-axis, it's plotted the value for each of those units. So 115 TVs, if you can see there, it's just under 120. So that would be roughly 115. And if we hover our mouse over each column, we can see the value, because it can be very difficult to look at this and say, well, okay, we know it's under 120. What is it exactly? You can hover your mouse over the column and you can see the value. I'm going to be showing you how to turn those values on. Similarly, 12 for laptops, 78 for printers, and so on. On the y-axis, you can see that it's going up in steps of 20, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. You might be thinking, why did it pick 20? Based on the data that we've typed in, it's picked 20 as the most sensible or suitable interval, which will give us enough scope to actually visually represent all of the changes in the data. Okay. Now, if our numbers have been closer together, or if they're much farther apart, Excel would have used a different interval or a different step up in numbers in order to give us a better idea visually of the differences between the various different products. But these numbers are relatively close together, so 20, Excel just deemed 20 was the most sensible step up or increment in the numbers on our y-axis in order to give us the best range and the best sense visually of the differences between these values. And that's it. That's all we need to talk about in terms of putting in the chart. Now I'm going to show you how to resize the chart as well, because as you can see, TVs, laptops, they're slightly angled here like this. It's not a big deal, but we can resize a chart at any point in time. We're not stuck with the size of it. So I've left clicked once on the chart and we have sizing handles. These are called sizing handles, these circles here. You've got 8 of them all around the chart. 3 in the top, 3 in the bottom, and then 2 on either side. I'm going to hover my mouse over the sizing handle in the bottom right hand corner. My mouse pointer has turned into a double-headed arrow. You probably won't be seeing that on the video because the screen capturing software that I'm using just doesn't render the mouse pointer like that, but you will see it on your own computer. I'm holding my mouse button down and I'm going to drag the chart to the right, and now you can see that Excel now has more space to display the titles horizontally. When it was smaller like this, it had to angle them in order to fit them, so I've just made it a little bit bigger, and that's it. And that is how, very simply, how we insert a simple column chart based on data that we've got selected. I'm going to now delete this chart. I'm going to left click once in it again. It's already selected, but I'm going to left click once in it again, and I'm going to press the delete key on my keyboard, and I'm just going to quickly insert the chart again. So we left click once in A1, hold the mouse button down to B9, click on the insert tab, go to the down arrow in the bar column charts, and then click on 2D column, and that's it. I'm going to reposition my chart. I'm going to hold my mouse button down on the sizing handle, drag it slightly just to resize it, and that's it. So in the next section of the video, I'm going to show you how to create a bar chart, which is going to be exactly the same process, and then we'll move on and we'll look at how to format column and bar charts. So that was creating a column chart. Now how do we create a bar chart? Well, in pretty much the same way. I'm going to delete this chart by left clicking once in it and pressing the delete key on my keyboard, and now I'm going to create the same data. I'm going to visualize or represent the same data, but this time using a bar chart instead of a column chart. Remember, with a column chart, the bars go up and down, but in a bar chart they go left and right. They're horizontally plotted instead of vertically plotted. And by plotted, I mean drawn. So I've still got my data selected from A1 down to B9. I go to the Insert tab. I go up to this little tool again, which is the Insert Column with Bar Chart button in the Charts group. Left click on the down arrow, and this time I choose between either the 2D or 3D bar chart. And again, I'm going to keep it simple. I'll keep it with the 2D bar chart. And that's it. As you can see, the bars are now, they're still bars, but instead of going up and down, in which case we'd call them columns, they're being plotted or drawn horizontally across the y-axis, across the x-axis, from left to right. So essentially the x and y axes have been flipped. Now the numbers are being plotted, the units representing the units being sold are on our x-axis, and the name of our products are on the y-axis. Other than that, it's exactly the same data which is being plotted. It's just a question of personal preference as to what you might actually want to do or how you might actually want to represent that data. We can do exactly the same thing in terms of resizing. I'm going to hover my mouse over one of the resizing handles, and I'm just going to left click, hold my mouse button down and drag. Didn't really need to do it in this particular case because it's only the numbers that are down here. With the text, there wasn't quite enough space for the text, but there is because they're now being plotted on the y-axis. The text is being drawn on the y-axis, but you can still resize the chart. So that is the main difference between the column and bar charts. Column, our bars go up and down. Bar charts, our bars go left and right, and it's simply a question of preference then as to which you want to use. Now, very quickly before I finish this section of the video, I just want to show you how sometimes I'm going to left click and delete this chart. And again, I want to go back to how some charts are not suitable depending on the data that you've got selected. So if I click on 2D column again, you can see that there are other variations of the column chart. This is a clustered column, and as the tooltip says, use this chart to compare values across a few categories and when the order of categories isn't important. So in other words, it doesn't matter whether TVs or printers is first, it doesn't make a difference. If I go to the next one over, which is a stacked column, I can use this chart to compare parts of a whole or show how parts of a whole change over time. It doesn't really make a difference for me because I've got no time component in my data. I'm not saying that these units are being sold over a particular time. So I could use it, but it doesn't really matter. The 100% stack column, however, is completely inappropriate for this kind of data, because as you can see from the tooltip, it says it compares the percentages that each value contributes to a total, and it shows how the percentage that each value contributes changes over time. We're not worried with the total here, we're not totaling up, so we're not expressing any of these values over here as a total of a whole. And as the second one's part of the tooltip says, shows how the percentage that each value contributes changes over time. Again, we've got no time component here. So really, the 100% stack column isn't appropriate. So if you're wondering at the start, well, how do I know which kind of column is appropriate? You can or how do I know which kind of chart is appropriate for my data? If you're not sure, you can click on recommended charts and Excel will suggest something for you. More often than not, it gets it right. But the second way of knowing is that if you click on something and clearly this looks wrong, everything is at 100%. And the reason everything is at 100% is because, as the tooltip says, for the 100% stack column, it compares the percentages that each value contributes to a total. But because we have no total, every value is being viewed as 100%, which is why we have all the bars up. So that doesn't make any sense visually. So sorry, I've just gone onto the chart styles there. So really, you're going to be sticking a lot of the time basically with a simple 2D clustered column. And the same goes for the 2D bar, okay? You've got a 2D bar, you've got a 2D stack bar, and then you've got a 100% stack bar, okay? Obviously, the clustered bar is the one that we're going to want to represent. You're going to know visually by looking at it. And then 3D for column and 3D bar is it's just a snazzier way of looking at the same thing. All right, that's the end of this section of the video. In the next section of the video, what we're going to do is I'm going to change back to a 2D column chart, and we're going to look at formatting, how to make changes to our charts, be they column or bar charts. So we're going to look at how to format the appearance of our column and bar charts, and also how to add in some elements that are not in the charts by default, but that will make the chart a little bit more readable and a little bit more human, user-friendly when we look at them. In this section of the video, we're going to look at how to format a bar chart or a column chart. We'll actually begin with the column chart. And I may not do examples for both column and bar charts because it's exactly the same. What I'm doing is going to be exactly the same. So I think I'm just going to show it to you for a column chart. And you can take it that the sequence of steps will be exactly the same for a bar chart as well. There's no point in repeating the same material just for bars that are, drawn in a different orientation. So I've got my A1 down to B9 selected. I'm going to insert a column chart again by clicking on the Insert tab. I'm already there. And then clicking on the down arrow and going to 2D column. Great. So we know how to do that by now. That's our column chart, our 2D column chart inserted. Along the x-axis, we have the names of our products. And along the y-axis, we have the values stepped up by 20. That's what Excel is. That's the interval Excel has calculated is probably the best interval to use to give you a good range, a good visual spread, and a good visual difference in the size of the bars. So I'm going to resize my chart by left-clicking on the sizing handle down here and just dragging it out a little bit. Now, something I mentioned earlier on was that we can change the formatting and we can change some of the elements of the charts that are not currently there. And there's two things missing from this column chart, which I'm going to put in, which I want to put in because it makes the chart more legible. And that's a title for the x-axis and for the y-axis. Now, down here, TVs, laptops, okay, we know that these are products. And up here along on the y-axis, we fairly good guess that these are number of products sold, but of course that's just maybe an assumption we're making. Why not just remove that ambiguity and actually say what these represent and what these numbers represent? So let's do that. We're going to add a chart element, and there are a couple of ways we can do it. I'm going to show you both of the ways. First of all, I'm going to left click away from the chart and bring your attention to the fact that there are no two tabs up here. They were there and now they're gone. If I left click on the chart again, you can see the two tabs have now reappeared: chart design and format. Left click away from the chart again and they're gone. Those tabs will only be there when you left click on a chart. And they contain chart design, and the format tab contain a whole bunch of tools for changing your chart and for adding different elements and different things to it, and for removing them as well. And also for changing data that's in the chart. There's an awful lot. Most of the stuff that you're going to be doing with relation to your chart, you're going to be accessing from these two tabs, but you'll only see these two tabs when your chart is selected. So I'm going to left click on the chart, and on the chart design tab, I'm going to go over here to the chart layouts group, and there's a little button called add chart element. And an element is simply some part of a chart that I can add. So I'm going to left click on the down arrow, and I'm going to go down to the second option, which is axis titles. And I can add a horizontal title, which is going to be, as you can see it being added in there, axis title. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to do the same thing, axis titles. I'm going to do the same thing for vertical. And that's it. I've now added my two titles to the chart. Adding the titles that way is a bit long-winded though, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete them by clicking on the undo button up here twice, just to go back twice, and now I'm back to where I was with the chart with no titles added. A quicker way of adding chart elements is when your chart is selected, you're going to see these three buttons over here. Now we'll ignore these two, but the plus button here is for adding chart elements. We can also remove chart elements. So if I click on the plus button here, I can very quickly add, when I select axis titles, both of them will be added. I need to put a tick in the box. Currently there's no tick in the box, which means that no axis titles are added. I'm going to put a tick in the box, and now both axis titles have been added. And that's all there is to adding titles to our axis, or to our axes. Now of course axis title and axis title are terrible names for titles. So what I want to do is I want to change the text here and here. And it's very easy to do. All we do is left click once on axis title on the x-axis, and you'll see that it's essentially just a text box with the text axis title in it. I can left click at the end of it like this, and I can delete axis title, and I can type in products. And then I can do the same over here for axis title. I'm going to left click at the end. This is a bit weird because you're typing at an angle, but don't worry, Excel is going to take care of all that for you. Delete it, and I'm going to say, let's say, number of units sold. Oh, typing at an angle is difficult. Number of units sold, and then left click away, and that's it. Now I can move these titles as well. So what I'm going to do is hover my mouse over the middle of the text in the x-axis, hold my mouse button down and just drag it down a little bit, and do the same for number of units. Position my mouse in the middle, hold my mouse button down and drag it out a little bit. The text is also a bit big, okay? I want to just reduce the text. I want it to be a little bit smaller than the text that's being used for the products and for the values over here. So that's easy to do as well. We simply left click once on, for instance, the x-axis, and we click on the home tab and go back to where we would normally change our fonts. And I'm going to make it, up in the font group, I'm just going to select 8, and I'm going to do the same for the y-axis text as well, because I want consistency. So that's how we change, that's how we insert axis titles, and that's how we change the actual size of the text. We can also do the following. I'm just going to jazz it up a little bit. I'm going to make it red. I'm going to make it bold, and I'm going to do the same for products. I'm left clicking once on products, I'm clicking on red, and I'm clicking on bold. And we could, if we want to, change the font as well, but I'm not going to go that far. The last thing I'll do as well is actually change our title up here. Don't forget, when we created the chart, Excel used the text that was in B1 as kind of a makeshift title, but it's not particularly the title that I want, so I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to type in, let's say, sales figures for, I don't know, May to June 2020, and then left click away. So that might be a much more accurate and a much more descriptive title for our chart. So save that. Actually, no, we're not going to save it. Sorry, we're not going to save it. We'll just leave it as it is because there are some more changes that I'm going to make, which we'll come back to now in the next section of the video. In this section of the video, we're going to look at how to change the colors of our column chart. We have a column chart which we had created in the previous section, and as you can see, we added some titles as well to the x-axis and to the y-axis just to make the data a little bit more legible. We can now definitely see that these are products and these are the number of units that we sold. They're not strictly speaking necessary, and they're not added by default when you create a column or a bar chart, but I always like to add them in just to make it the data more presentable, especially for somebody who may not be in the organization. You might be showing it to somebody, maybe a layperson, and you want to just make the data as clear as possible and remove any ambiguity. And we also changed the title up here as well. Just for the sake of completion, I'm going to make the title red. I'm on the home tab. As you can see, I've selected the title here, and I'm going to click red. I'm going to bold it as well. And I'm going to change the font just because we can. I'm going to change it to Arial Black, okay, just to show that you can do that. Now what I want to do is I want to change the color of the columns. The default color that's used for columns when you create a column or a bar chart in Excel is this series, or is this value of blue. So you got this blue section, or this blue shade. And I've left clicked, I'm going to click away from the chart again and show you this, what I just did there. I'm going to left click once on any column, and you'll see that all of the columns are selected. So now when I apply a color to these columns, they're all going to be affected. And the way we do it is we click on the Format tab. Don't forget the Chart Design and Format tab will always show up when you've got any section of the chart or the chart itself selected. And in the Shape Styles group, you'll see a little tool called Shape Fill, and there's a drop-down arrow beside it. And that's what this tool is going to do. It's going to fill these shapes, because that's all these columns are, they're shapes. It's going to fill these columns or these shapes with any color that I choose. So I'm going to click on the down arrow, and I can select any color that I want from the theme colors or from the standard colors. Or if I want to choose my own color, if I want to fill these bars with my own color that's not here, I can click on More Fill Colors, and I can left click on the Custom tab, and I could click and drag around and create any color at all that I want. Click OK. That was a terrible color to choose, black. So I'm going to do that again, Shape Fill, More Fill Colors, and I'll go to Custom, and let's see, like that, something like that, and click OK. And there we go, pale blue, like that. And because all of the columns were selected, all of them were filled with that color. So I'll just do that again quickly. I'll left click once on any column at all. On the Format tab, I'm going to click on Shape Fill, and I won't bother going into More Fill Colors here. I'll just pick another shade of blue. I'll go with a shade of green this time. I'll go with a light green, like this. And that's it. Now, if you wanted to select just one column and change that, only the color of that column, maybe you wanted to take the product that was selling the most, like smartphones, or maybe selling the least, like laptops, and you wanted to change the color of just that one column. The trick is you click on one column, and then you click again on the column that you want to isolate. So I'm clicking on smartphones again, and now only smartphones is selected. So now I can go up to the Format tab, which I'm still on, left click on Shape Fill, and I can select another color, let's say red, and only that column is selected. So I'll do that again. I click on any one of the columns, all of them are selected. This time I'll go with laptops. I'll left click once on the column, just the column that I want to change, and now only that one is selected. And then I can go up to Shape Fill on the Format tab, and I can select red. So maybe you want to kind of alert people to the fact that we're not selling very many laptops, or maybe we're selling more smartphones than anything else. Again, you're not changing the data, you're just changing how it's being displayed. So that's all there is to changing the colors for our columns. Now we can do it another way as well. What we can do is we can right click on any one of the columns. Doesn't matter which one, because when we right click they'll all be selected, and we can go down to this Format Data Series. Now data series means the entire series of data here that's being represented visually by these columns. And when we left click on that, do that again, the Format Data Series pane opens up here, and there's a paint bucket over here, and we can click on Fill, and then we can click on, there are many more sophisticated ways we can fill. We can fill with a gradient, or we can fill with a pattern, or we can fill with a solid fill color. And then we could choose our color from here in the same way. And again, if we wanted to just right click on one of them, what we could do is, again, left click on one just to select it, then go to right click. And this time it will say Format Data Point instead of Format Data Series. because we've only got one column selected, which is one point in the data. This point over here, the 158, because it's the smartphones. And if I click on Format Data Point, the Format Data Point pane opens up instead of Format Data Series. It's exactly the same thing. We click on the paint bucket, we go to Solid Fill, and we select our color. I think it's fair to say, though, that it's probably just easier, but I just wanted to show you the two options, to left click, to go to the Format tab, and then to click on Shape Fill and select your color like that. Or if you just want to do one, just left click on any one of them to select all of them, then left click on one to select just that one, go to Shape Fill, and then select the color that you want. This process is exactly the same for bar charts, so I'm not going to show you it for bar charts because it's exactly the same. Remember, bar charts are column charts, if you like, but just with the bars plotted horizontally instead of vertically like this. So in the next section, what we're going to do, the last piece of formatting that we're going to do for these are bar and column charts, are changing the colors of the chart area itself and something known as the plot area. So we'll look at that in the next section. Now we're going to look at how to change the actual color of two areas within the chart. First of all, the chart area itself, and secondly, an area within the chart known as the plot area. And first of all, what are they and what do they mean? If I hover my mouse over any area around the edges of the chart, you'll see a little tooltip pop up here under my mouse pointer which says chart area. Hopefully you are seeing that on the video. I'm pretty sure you should be seeing it on the video. But again, because of the limitations or the quirks of the screen capturing software that I'm using, sometimes you'll see my pointer won't look like what I'm saying it's looking like. But the tooltips should be popping up. So you should see the tooltip chart area popping up, which means that this section all around here, the outside section of this box in which the chart is known as the chart area. It's the overall container for the chart. But within here, within the actual chart area itself, if I click anywhere in here, you'll see a second box. And this second box within the chart area is known as the plot area. And we call it the plot area because it's where the data is actually plotted. And when I say plotted, I mean actually drawn. It's where the bars are rendered or drawn based on the values that the chart is actually based on. So we can change the area of these two colors independently of each other. First of all, let's see how to change the color of the chart area. And probably the easiest way of doing it is to just left click once on the chart area, and then on the Format tab, which I'm already on, we go to, just as we did when we were changing the bars and the column colors, we go to Shape Fill, because that's all the chart is. It's just a shape. It's a rectangular shape. So I'm going to left click on the Shape Fill, drop down arrow, and I'm going to select a color. Now obviously you need to be careful with the color that you select, because the colors can clash with the color of your text. But I'm going to go with I'll go with this color, blue. And as you can see, the entire background color of the chart area has been colored. Now we can also color the plot area individually, independently of the chart area. And it would be a good idea to do that in this particular case because the plot area now is kind of lost within this sea of blue. So I'm going to left click once on the plot area and do the same thing. I'm going to go up to Shape Fill, and I'm going to go, let's see, we'll pick a slightly darker color, darker shade of blue. So that's the trick with colors. You want light and dark, dark and light to contrast against each other. And that's it. That's how you change the color of the plot area and the chart area. And the same goes, exactly the same goes for bar charts. It's exactly the same sequence of steps, so I won't show you that because it's exactly the same thing that you'd be doing. You're going to click on the chart area, go to Format, select a color from your Shape Fill, and then you're going to do the same for plot area. You're going to go to Shape Fill and you're going to select a color for that. So it can really help your charts to stand out. Okay, you can really kind of make the data stand out. Now the colors here, this kind of light brown or mauve or whatever it is probably a bit weak, so I'd probably end up recoloring the columns. Let's do that actually. I'm going to left click once on any column and they'll all be selected. I'll go to Shape Fill and I'll choose something a lot darker. Maybe that's too dark. Maybe this, something like this. You can disappear down the rabbit hole with this stuff. Don't forget, you're not changing any of the data, you're just changing the aesthetic or the style, the appearance of the chart. Now that we know how to change the area, the color of the chart area and the plot area, the very last thing that we'll look at in terms of formatting for bar and column charts are applying chart styles. Very, very easy to do, and we'll look at that in the next section. The last thing we'll look at with regard to formatting column and bar charts is how to apply what's known as a chart style. We've seen that we can fine-tune and manually adjust the appearance of things like the columns or the bars and the color of the chart area, the color of the plot area, the fonts and so on and so forth that are used for our titles, our X and Y axis titles, and for the title of the chart itself. But there's a quicker way of doing it without having to kind of, fiddle around with all of these settings. We can apply what's known as a chart style, which is kind of like an inbuilt style theme or template to our chart. And the way we do it is we left click once on the chart and we go to Chart Design. Left click on one of the two tabs which will show up when you have your chart selected. And there is a chart styles group in which there is a library of different chart styles that we can choose from. And if you hover your mouse over each one, it gives you a little preview of what your chart will look like when you actually left click it. As you can see, I'm hovering over these styles. They're numbered, style 1, style 2, and so on and so forth. And there are a couple of more as well. If I click on this more button here, there are a couple of more that are listed down here. So again, I can choose whichever one I want. I'm going to go with, I'll go with this one here, which is quite a radical, it's kind of a futuristic looking one. And left click on style number 13. And that's it. Everything is then changed. Your plotting area, your chart area, your fonts, everything is changed in one go. And if you get fed up with that, or if somebody says, no, I don't like it, it's too difficult to read, you can very quickly go back to another style just by clicking on the relevant chart style in the chart style group. So that's it. That's all there is to actually applying a style to a chart. And we can apply a style to any chart that we create. The chart styles will be available. There's an inbuilt gallery or library of chart styles that we can apply to any chart that we create. Similarly for the other two charts that we're going to look at for pie charts and for line graphs as well. That's all there is to bar charts and column charts. In the next section of the video, we're going to look at how to create a pie chart, and we're going to use the same data as well. We're going to create or represent this data visually using what's known as a pie chart. That's our column and bar charts looked at. Let's look at another kind of chart that we can create now. There are many different kinds of charts that we can create in Excel. I'm going to delete this chart by left clicking once on it and pressing the delete key on my keyboard. And I'm going to select my data again, because remember, when you create a chart you need to have some data selected first of all on which the chart is going to be based. So I've left clicked on A1, I've held my left mouse button down and I've dragged down as far as cell B9. That's the range of cells which contains the data that I'm going to base my chart on. I'm going to go back to Insert, and I'm going to go back to the recommended, the charts group. I'll ignore recommended charts. But down here we can see that there is what's known as a pie or a donut chart. And as the tooltip says, use this chart type to show proportions of a whole. In other words, use it when the total of your numbers is 100%. Now that doesn't quite apply to what we're doing here. We haven't added up our numbers down here. We're not too interested in representing these numbers as part of a whole. But it doesn't really matter, because the pie chart can still be used to represent our data. The second part of the tooltip, it says you can click the arrow to see the different types of pie and donut charts. So there are different variations of a pie chart, as there were different variations of column and bar charts. Again, we'll keep it simple, okay? There's a 2D pie chart. There's also this one here, a pie of pie. We're going to stay away from that, and a bar of pie. We're going to stay away from that as well. We're going to stick with either a 2D pie chart, a 3D pie chart, and there's also what's known as a donut chart, which represents simply a circle, and then each segment in the circle represents that particular value for that particular product. Let's keep it simpler again though. We'll just go with a 2D pie chart. We'll left click once, and that's it. That's the chart created. Now we have no X and Y axis in a pie chart. That wouldn't make sense because it's just a circle. But each one of these segments is colored to give you an idea of which product, what percentage of that product of the whole that it is. So if you look at the whole as being 360 degrees, if you like, if I was to add up these numbers, which I'll actually do using the AutoSum function now, 561, we can see that TVs is 115 of the total of 561 products. Laptops is 12 of 561, which is the total. But we don't need to do that in order to actually create the pie chart. So yeah, this represents pretty close to, I mean, it's an accurate representation of the data. It's not the easiest to read, however. There are a couple of things that we could include in this pie chart, which will make the data a bit more legible. So the pie chart itself is here, Okay, just like the bar chart and the column chart, there are certain features that we can add, and there's certain colors that we can change. We have a title up here. This is a chart title. It's going to base that on units sold. I'm going to change this title just because we can, and I'm going to say units sold during May 2020. So we might want to give the title, we might want to make it more relevant and more meaningful and more descriptive, because units sold, well, units sold when? So we'll say units sold during May 2020. And then down here we have what's known as a legend. You may be familiar with legends from maps, where they give you a little symbol, let's say of a tree, which means that there's a forest there, or a little bridge, which means that there's like a railway crossing there. And it's the same for legends in a pie chart in Excel. This chart is color coded. And this is one of the ways in which pie charts are sometimes not the easiest to read, because we can see the TVs is blue, but depending on your ability to detect color, this blue and this blue, well, which is which, you know? What we can do is we can hover our mouse over any of the segments in the circle, and we'll be told which one it is. So this is TVs, and it also shows us the value, 115, and it also shows us the percentage of the whole that it is. That percentage of the whole would be 561. So that's quite useful, but it will be even more useful if we had these values actually displayed on the chart itself. So in the next section of the video, I'm going to show you how to add the values and also how to add the percentages and have them displayed on the chart, so that you don't need to display or you don't need to hover your mouse over each segment, because this legend down here isn't hugely helpful, and if we had lots more colors, it might be very difficult to discern them between them and to pick them apart. So we'll see how to add in those values now and percentages in the next section. So we've seen how easy it is to create a pie chart based on our data, but we've also seen that the pie chart, while accurately representing the data, could do with a little bit of help in becoming more legible and becoming a little bit more human friendly and user friendly when we look at the data, because we're looking at TVs, but we don't know how many TVs we've sold. And you also may get confused between the various different shades of blue when similar shades are being used. This series of brown and this series, or this shade of brown and this shade of brown, are very similar as well. So we've seen that we have to hover our mouse over it to actually get a look at the values and the percentages as well. So while it's color coded, we can see quite clearly that stereos is here. We don't know how many stereos or what percentage of it. We just know that we haven't sold very many. So let's have a look at how to add these values in so that they're displayed in our chart. Easy to do. We left click once on the chart and we go up to chart design. And over here, this is very similar to what we did with adding our chart elements for axis titles and column and bar charts. I'm going to left click on the down arrow, and I'm going to go down to data labels. Currently I have no data labels applied. Okay, but if I go to any one of these options here, you can see that the number for each product is now being displayed in the appropriate segment of the pie chart. And if I go down to inside end, so center means it will be placed in the center of the segment. Inside end means it will be placed inside at the end of the segment. Outside end means it will be placed outside. Best fit, and so on and so forth. Best fit will be a combination of the two. So for instance, you can see that 12 just wouldn't fit in the segment because it was too small. And similarly with 23. So Excel placed them outside, but there was space enough for the others. I'm going to go with outside end, like this. And now what I can see is I can see quite clearly 158, 23, 98, 45. That's much better. Even better again would be a percentage added to that as well. If I can add in my percentages. So as well as seeing 45, I can see how much of 45 now. Again, I can hover my mouse over it and I can see that we sold 45 dishwashers. But if I wanted to know what the percentage of that was of the whole, I would have to hover my mouse over it. So let's add that in too. Let's go to add chart element and we'll go to data labels again. And this time we're going to go down to more data label options. And when we do, we'll get up a format data labels pane over here. Okay. And what I want to do is I want to left click on label options like this. And I'm going to see a number of options that I can put down. I can left click on category name, for instance, to turn on the category so that I'm not just seeing a number, I'm actually seeing the category of the product And I can also turn on percentages. Now there comes a point where you might say, well, what's the point of having the legend down here? And that would be a reasonable question to ask. So I'm going to turn off the category name, and I'm just going to leave on the values and the percentages. And that's it. That's all there is to that. I can left click away now, and I can see at a glance that 158, for instance, smartphones were sold, and that's 28% of the overall total. And we can see that we sold 32 stereos, which is 6%, and so on. So pretty easy to do. And that's all there is, excuse me, to adding data labels. And of course, there are different data labels, as we saw, that we could add. I'm just going to go back into Add Chart Element, Data Labels, more data label options, and go to Label Options. Sorry, Text Options. Back onto Label Options, and we can see that we can add in various different, we could add series name, for instance, we could add category name, and so on and so forth. It depends on what you want to do yourself. The options are there for you, and that's it. So in the next section, what we'll look at is just some coloring, okay, just some coloring as we did with the actual bar and column charts. We'll look at how to change the coloring of the pie chart. Now let's look at how to change the color of our pie chart. And there are two colors that we're interested in changing. One is the chart area, just like in column and bar charts, and the second is the plot area. Again, the plot area is where your data is being plotted, or in other words, drawn. The chart area is very easy to find. You just hover your mouse over the outside edges of the chart, and the little tooltip pops up to say chart area, and we change its color in exactly the same way that we changed our column and bar chart area color. We go to Format, we go to Shape Fill, and we simply select a color. I'll try and stay away from blue. I keep going for blues. I like blue, but I'll go with something like, go with this green here. So it's exactly the same process. Now, plotting area, I'm just going to make my pie chart a bit bigger as well. We can make our pie charts bigger in the same way that we made our bar and column charts bigger, clicking and dragging on the sizing handle. Let me just move it up here so we can get a better look at it. We can change the plotting area as well, but we're changing something different here. In the plotting area, what we'll be changing is the color of our segments. Now remember, in a bar or column chart, when we clicked on one bar or column, all bars and columns were selected. And it's the same with pie charts. If I left click on any one segment, all of my segments are selected. Then if I go to Shape Fill and I select any color, they will all be given the same color. Now for this particular pie chart, it wouldn't make a lot of sense because my legend down here is now useless for a start because my legend was color coded. Each product had a different color or a color key which let me know what I was looking at. So my legend is now largely useless. So what I would have to do here is also turn on my category values. I have my value here and I have my percentage values, but I want to turn on the category as well. And I would do that by going to Chart Design, Add Chart Element, Data Labels, more data label options. This is the Format Data Labels section over here will appear. Then I click on Label Options and I would want to turn on my category name here for my values. So now I can see, then I could delete my legend because my legend was useless after I had made all segments the same color. So you could do that if you didn't like, some people don't like using colors to differentiate between it because if somebody is colorblind or is just not great at differentiating between colors, and even for those of us who aren't, it can sometimes be difficult to differentiate between very similar shades. So this might be a better option for you, or a more appropriate option. It might just be the option that you'd want to go for. That's if you wanted to color all of the segments. But if we want to color just different segments individually, we do exactly the same thing that we did with column and bar charts. We left click on any one segment to select just that one, to select the entire pie chart. All segments are selected, and then we left click once again just to select this segment. Now I have the TV segment selected. And what I can do is go to Format, I can go to Shape Fill, and I can go to, let's say, go with red. And the nice thing about this is that the color, the legend down here also changes for you as well. Let's try it again with another one. I'm going to left click on, let's say, smartphones. Again, don't forget, if you click away from the chart and if you left click on any one segment, all of them are selected. Click again on the segment that you want to isolate. Select a color from it from the Format tab and Shape Fill. Let's go with this orange here. I think that's orange. No, it's not. I am colorblind. Sorry, it's like a dark yellow. And that the legend changes down here. So you can change them individually as well. So that's all there is to changing the chart area and the plot area. Slight difference in changing the plot area is that if you make them all the one color, then you might need to turn on your category names as well, so that you'll know what you're looking at. And you could, if you wanted to, you could delete, if all of them are going to be the same color, you can delete your legend down here. You can left click once on the legend and you can press delete on your keyboard to get rid of it, because it would be largely useless if your colors were all the same. And my colors aren't all the same, so I'm going to keep my legend here. So in the very last section for formatting pie charts, we're going to look at how to apply chart styles to a pie chart. Finally, we'll look at how to apply a chart style to a pie chart. Just as we did with applying styles to our bar and column charts, we can apply a built-in style, a chart style, to our pie charts. And of course, a chart style is simply like a built-in design theme or template that's built into Microsoft Excel. It's very easy to do. All we do is left-click once on the chart to select it. And then on the chart design, we have our chart styles group, and this time it's going to be showing you styles related to the kind of chart that you have, which in this case is a pie chart. So they're going to look different to the styles that you had for the bar and column charts. So we can left click on any one of these, or just hover your mouse over them to get a look at them, to get a look at a preview of them, like so. And again, there's a more button here. This little down arrow will give you a look at more of them. And when you find the one that you like, you can simply left click once on it like this, and your entire chart is then applied, or the style is applied to your entire chart. So it's very, very easy to do that. And of course you can change the style if you get bored with it, or if you decide that it's a bit too difficult to read. And you can also then fine tune it yourself. Just as with the others, you can actually start right clicking on various different things and choosing different fill colors. But the whole point of the chart style is that you don't really have to do that. It's just a ready built inbuilt or ready-made inbuilt style that you apply to your chart design. And that's it. That's it for pie charts. We're going to look at our third and final type of chart now, which is a line chart. The last section of this video is going to look at the third and final type of chart that we can create in Excel, or at least the three charts that we're going to concentrate on. Technically speaking, we're looking at 4 charts, because we looked at column charts and bar charts, which were really just variations on a theme. But then we looked at pie charts, which is what we're looking at here. This is from the last section of the video. And now we're going to look at something known as a line chart. Now the data that we have here is not really suitable to be displayed in a line chart. For a start, there's no time component in it. And if we go to the Insert tab, which I'm on already, and go to the Charts group, and if I hover my mouse over the Insert Line or Area chart, we'll ignore area charts, we're just going to look at line charts, we can see that this type of chart is typically used to show trends over a specific amount of time, like years or months or days, or categories. So there's no time component here. We're not looking at how many units we've sold of each particular product over a particular point in time. So instead, on sheet 2, what I've done is I've typed in the following. I'm just going to bold these so we can see them a bit better. In column A1, I've got the dates from the 12th of the 5th, which was yesterday, up until the 12th of the 6th. So that's a month, 30 days, 31 days. And then in the B column, I've typed in sales. And then I've just typed in fairly arbitrary figures. They're not quite arbitrary, because I've tried to give a good range of going up and down, and then sharp ascents and then steep descents. And I've got a pretty good range of numbers in there, which we're going to see. I could select that, and I could go to charts, and I could go to, I could represent that as a column chart. But typically what you might see is the following. I'm keeping the data selected, and I'm going to insert, and I'm going to go to line. And this is typically what you'll see. Not all the time, but we can see a curve. We can see an actual curve going up and down. If you've been watching the Department of Health press briefings every day, you might be familiar with, on the ongoing coronavirus crisis, you may be familiar with these curves. You may see curves, the various different, the Chief Medical Officer and various different people showing you curves. And a lot of those curves are line curves. And what they do is they give you a sense of a trend which emerges over a period of time. So in this sense, what we want to do is we want to look at our sales for that month. We're going to pretend that, let's say this is later on this year in September, and that we've had the sales figures are in from the 12th of May to the 12th of June. And we can see then going up and down and up and down. So it's a pretty big roller coaster, and it's probably fair to say that your sales probably wouldn't seesaw this wildly up and down. But we can see at a glance this continuing trend, this continuing curve going up and down. And we can certainly identify that sales seem to hit rock bottom here, and then they seem to peak over here, and so on and so forth. So they're easy to make, they're easy to create. As you can see, all I did was I selected my data, I went to the Insert tab, I went to a line, and then I selected this. Use this chart to show trends over time or categories. Use it when the order of categories is important and there are many data points. I've come back to sheet 1, and if you'll recall, in sheet 1 we had created a pie chart. We'd also created a column and a bar chart based on the data in sheet 1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this pie chart, and I want to show you why line charts are not always suitable depending on the data that you have. And the same could be said for bar charts and column charts and pie charts as well. Sometimes, depending on the data series that you have, the chart that you're going for may not be the most suitable or appropriate. And I'll give you an example. I'm going to delete this chart, and I'm going to go to Insert, and I've got my data selected here, and I'm going to go to just put in a 2D line chart. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense, okay? As you can see, it's plotted the data based on the data that's over here, based on the data in my series, but it doesn't make a huge amount of sense. We sold, yes, roughly we sold exactly, 115 TVs, but then showing a line going down here to laptops. There's no correlation, you see, between selling TVs and laptops. Selling this amount of TVs did not lead to a huge reduction in, and what does this line represent? It doesn't make sense. You could say, well, it's overall the number of sales, products that we, went down, and then we went up, and then we went down. But that doesn't make a huge amount of sense either. So you might get away with it, but it really doesn't make sense to do it that way at all. So that's why sometimes, depending on what you're visually representing, you don't want to go with a certain type of chart. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to go back to sheet 2, and this is the sheet, or this is the chart that we had created for this data series. The line chart here does make sense for this data series because it's chronological. What we're doing is we're charting values over a series of time, in this case dates, in this case a month, from May 5th to June 5th, or to June 6th in fact. So just over a month and a day. And this makes sense. We could, I'm going to delete this, select all of this again, we could model this as a bar chart. Nothing wrong with that. Now, you'll notice that this is a column chart actually, sorry, but you'll notice that there's a nice symmetry going on here. I've just noticed it. It looks like the Cisco company logo. I've just noticed. That's unintentional. This isn't ideal either because the columns are quite close together. It's a bit difficult to read. It might work better as a column chart. Let's try that. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to show you a quick way of changing charts as well, so that you don't have to keep deleting them and putting them back in. Sorry, a bar chart. Again, it's hard to read. It's hard to read. There's an awful lot of bars here, and it's not the easiest to read. So in this case, where we have a lot of data, or at least a lot more data than could be comfortably accommodated in a bar or column chart, definitely a line chart is a good fit for this one. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. So it's a good fit, and it gives us a good visual sense. So just to be aware of that, just to be aware of the kind of data that you're attempting to visually represent. Now there's a second kind of line chart which also is very useful, which I'm going to put in, and you may have seen it under the menu here. Now we're ignoring a lot of these, but this is the line chart. We're going to ignore this stacked line, and we're going to ignore this 100% stacked line. That's like 100% stacked column. It wouldn't make any sense for what we're doing. But I am going to put in this one here, a line with markers. And essentially, if I extend my chart again, essentially what happens is a little marker or a little circle is put in for each data entry point. So here's our first one for €568 on that date. Here's our second one, our third one, and so on and so forth. The markers are a good way of visually representing where on the curve or where on the line data is actually happening. Where is the data being inserted on the curve? So rather than just a line, we can actually see markers on the line for each point on the line. So that's very useful as well. Now, as it says on the tooltip, it's always good to read these tooltips. The line with markers is good for when the order of categories is important. The order of categories is important because this is chronological. There's a series, there's a time issue here. And when there are few data points, there are relatively few data points here. We have 30 or 31 of them, however many we have. So we're getting away with that. If there were a large number of data points, if we were modeling maybe 6 months and we wanted every day, then having that many markers next to each other probably wouldn't be a great idea. So we probably wouldn't use a line chart with markers then. We would just use a regular line chart with no markers. The first type that we had, in fact, which would be this one here. Because it would just be, the markers would start to kind of visually, all you're going to see is markers, all you're going to see is circles. So that is something to consider. Or you could decide not to use a line chart at all. You could simply decide to use a column chart because, as it says in a column chart or in a bar chart, if the category text is too long, we can save space and so on. And it might be just an easier way of representing the data in a column or a bar chart. I'm not saying there's specifically any right or wrong way to do that. Sometimes you look at a chart and it's too fussy, it's too clustered. But it's just something to bear in mind. Okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to put my line chart back in. I'm going to put it in with markers as well, okay, because this is a good example of how markers might be useful. And so here we are, a marker for each data entry point. In other words, for each of these values, there is a marker on the line. So as well as seeing the line visually going up and down, we can see at what point the line is marked with that data. We'll round off this video now by doing what we did with the bar, column and pie charts, which is essentially formatting the appearance of the line chart that we have. And you'll be happy to hear it's exactly the same, or almost exactly the same, as formatting bar and line charts, or sorry, bar and column charts and pie charts. We simply select the chart area, and we also have a plot area in here as well. So it's very similar to bar and column charts. First thing I'm going to do is I want to add some titles. We're back to an X and Y setup with this. We didn't have an X and a Y axis with the pie chart, but we do with the line chart, and I don't have any axes. So I want to add some axes. So again, I'm going to select the chart by clicking on the chart area, go up to chart design and click on add chart element. I can do it this way, or I can do it more quickly over here by simply clicking on the chart elements button here, and I'm going to select axis titles. And you can see that my axis titles are placed on the x-axis and on the y-axis. And Excel always sizes the font relative to the font sizes that are already in there. So I'm going to left click at the end of axis title down here, because of course that's not a very good text for an axis title, and I'm going to type in let's say day, because that is literally the day. And then over here I'm going to type in let's say sales figure, or sales amount. And again, we can format these the way we formatted our titles for bar and column charts. I've left clicked on the y-axis title and I'm going to bold it. I'll make it a little bit bigger, not too bigger. Yeah, I'll make it 12, and I'll do the same for day. So I'll make that 12, I'll bold it, and I'll also make sales. I've clicked on the sales. I want to rechristen that. I'm going to call it sales figures. Yeah, sales figures. Give me a break. Every one of those days where you just can't type. Sales figures from, and I'll put in the actual dates. I'll put in 12th of the 5th, 2020 to, what is it, 12th of the 6th, 2020. So there's no ambiguity now about what this chart represents. And again, I'm going to bold that. I'll make it red. No, I'll make it blue actually, because I think it would look better. Okay, so exactly the same as we did with the previous, with the column and the bar charts for putting in our titles. Now let's change the area, the color area for our chart area and for our plotting area, which we do in exactly the same way as we did for all of the other charts. I've left clicked once in chart area, I'm going up to format, and I'm going to shape fill, because again, this is just a shape that we want to fill with a particular color. Now you need to be careful obviously when you're choosing a color, so I'm going to go with a, back to blue again. I'm going to go with a light enough blue like this, and that's changing the chart area color. Now we can also change the plot area. Don't forget this is a plot area in here where your data, in this case the line and all the markers are plotted. So I left click once on that, and now my plotting area is highlighted. And what I can do is I can fill that with a different shape. And I'll go with a gray this time. I'll go with a light gray, something like that. Yeah, there we go. And that's all there is to it. Now, if you'll recall, we could change the color of bars and of columns in our bar and column charts, and we can also change the color of segments in a pie chart. We can change the color of the line that we're using as well. Again, blue is the default, but we can change that quite easily by left-clicking anywhere once on the line, and all of the segments of the line are selected for us. Now, by segments of the line, I mean the bit of the line that goes from the first value to the second value. And whether that's going to be up or down depends on whether the number is increasing or decreasing. So if you can see, obviously 568 to 789, that's going to be an increase. How much of an increase depends on the overall data series and how much it's climbing towards the maximum figure in that area. But it's going to be an increase either way. So the line is going to be sloping up. And then when you get to the next point, which is 789, that's sloping up again. Let's find one that goes down. Up here we have 1,600. So 1600, and then there's quite a steep drop off down to 1100. So that's what I mean by the line segments. This is the whole line, and you can see all the markers on it. Again, I'll show you how to do it as well, because it may be something you want to do. You can select one segment of the line as well, but for now we're just going to select the whole line, and we did that by clicking anywhere at all on the line, and the whole line is selected. And again, we go up to format. We don't go to shape fill in this particular case because it's not a shape, it's a shape outline. That's what we want to change. So we click on the down arrow, and again we choose any color we want. I've selected red, and that's it. We've now changed the color of the line. There may be, however, one section of the line that you want to color differently, so it's the same process as before. We left click on the line to select it as a whole, and then we left click again on that particular section that we want to have selected. And what we can do then is we can choose a different color for that section. So as you can see, I'll just do that again quickly. I left click on the whole line. Now I want to just select this part of the line, which is moving down like this. So I left click once on that. Sorry, left click again, left click once on the line again, just to select that part of the line. You can see the marker is selected, and then I choose any color I want. So I can choose maybe black or blue or whatever you want. You might want to maybe draw people's attention to a particular downward trend or a particular upward trend. More often than not, though, you'll probably just be leaving the line the same color. So that's all there is to changing the color of the line itself and different sections of the line. And very finally, before we move off line charts completely, we're almost at the end of this video, we're going to look at how to apply styles. Good news is it's exactly the same as applying chart styles to pie charts, line charts and bar charts, or indeed any other kind of chart in Excel. We left click once in chart area, and we left click on chart design, and we simply choose the style that we want from chart styles. Again, chart styles is going to look different here than it did from when the chart styles were being displayed for pie charts or line and bar charts, or sorry, bar and column charts, because this is a chart style library specifically for line charts. So again, if you hover your mouse over any of them, you can get some very futuristic and mad looking ones where as you can see, the values are put in as well on the line. That's very, very clumsy on the eye, but it may be something you want. And again, there's a more button here. If we click more, we can go with other. There's a nice kind of shaded line there. So it means you don't have to do all of the work yourself. You can simply very quickly click on one of these, and the entire chart is then adopts that style. It's the entire chart adopts the style that you want from the library, and it's applied to the entire chart. Fonts, everything, colors, everything is changed. So that's all there is to applying a chart style to a line chart. In the last section of this video, we're going to look at how to change the chart themselves. You've seen me doing this a lot where I've actually deleted a chart and then put in another kind of chart. So if I've wanted to go from a line chart to a bar chart or from a column chart to a pie chart, I've deleted the chart that was there and then I've put in another chart. The good news is you don't need to do that. Excel allows you, and you can probably see the button where it allows you to do that. Excel allows you to do that with one mouse click. Now you do need to be careful when you're doing it, just in case you're moving. Remember, we spoke about how some charts are not really suitable depending on the kind of data that you have, but we'll look at how to do it. I'm going to left click once on this chart to select it, and on the chart design tab you'll see that there is a change chart type button in the type group. I'm going to left click once on that, and I get up a dialog box called change chart type. That's the name of this dialog box. And from this dialog box I can then choose any other kind of any type of chart that I want. I'm going to change this back to a column chart. So if I left click on the column category here, I can then choose the kind of column chart that I want from here. I'm going to go with just a regular 2D clustered column chart. Left click once and it's changed for me from the line chart back to a column chart. You wouldn't do this, but let's change it to, I think there's probably too many segments in it for a pie chart, but we'll see what it looks like. Let's click on change chart type again. Let's left click on pie. We'll just go with a standard 2D pie chart. You get a little preview of what it looks like here. And it looks terrible. There's no reading that at all. Now we could maybe do a little bit of work with adding values and category names and percentages and stuff like that. But again, this is a great example of where this kind of chart would not be really suitable for this. You're much better off with a bar chart or a column chart or a line chart. So let's change it back to a line chart now. So we're going to go with change chart type again. We're going to go with line chart, and I'm just going to go with a standard 2D line chart. Click OK, and now we're back to something much more legible. You could of course have changed it to, if I change chart type again and change it to a line chart with markers, which will give me my markers. Notice the way it's still retaining the style as well that I'd applied to it. So that's it. That's the end of this video. Thanks for watching. I hope it made sense. You've got some exercises there at the bottom. You'll see them in the video description. Just click on the show more link, and you've got also material that you can download as well, the notes and so on and so forth. So if you have any questions about any of this material, you can either leave a comment in this video or you can get in touch with me and I'll get back to you as soon as possible.